To 6:30, let's have a look at the front pages. The Telegraph leads with Rishi Sunak's claim that his Brexit deal is a new way forward, and Ursula von der Leyen saying she hopes the deal will open a new chapter for UK-EU relations.
The Mail writes that the Prime Minister might have done the impossible and claims that a feared Tory revolt over the deal melted away last night.
You can put the oven on, is the Metro's headline, referring to Boris Johnson's claim made more than 3 years ago that his own deal with the EU was oven-ready.
And the Mirror reports that the ashes of Peter Sutcliffe, the serial killer known as the Yorkshire Ripper, have been scattered at a beauty spot near the Cumbrian village of Arnside, where he visited as a child. We're joined by the Mail's Andrew Pierce, the Mirror's Kevin Maguire. Where should we start? The Northern Ireland Protocol. How, Kevin, is Boris Johnson feeling today?
Yeah.
Sick. I would have thought. No, he'd be worried, will he? Does he attack it, or does he realise he might sound churlish? Because Sunak has pulled off a bit of an ingenious coup here, I think, involving the King. Of course, the Unionists in Northern Ireland, the DUP, it's their monarch.
Yes.
They revere him, they like to wave the flag. And then he's got round the question of the European Court of Justice and democratic accountability in Northern Ireland by saying there will be this Stormont break. Now, to apply the break, you have to have the Stormont Assembly meeting, which means the DUP would have to resume power sharing, which means they would have to accept a Sinn Féin First Minister, and then they would have to keep on... It's very, very clever. It's not there yet, but it is clever, and he's making the best of a mess.
But he rather danced on Boris Johnson's political grave in the Commons yesterday, didn't you think? He sort of made this big thing about how he was sorting out the problems which his essentially predecessor had failed to solve. While, by the way, he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. Boris Johnson said, you know, over my dead body there'll be a border in Northern Ireland. Sunak says there was a border.
Yeah, and he got rid of it.
And he's got rid of it.
It was... he didn't exactly crow, but it wasn't far off it. But I think he's entitled to his moment of glory. Because
Is it wise?
Boris, I do not buy this idea, Ed, that Boris Johnson's coming back. I just simply don't. He's got some support, but there are many, many people at the backbenches who say, over my dead body...
Your paper's had a bit of a kind of Damascene conversion the last few days.
My paper admires Boris Johnson because he won a great election victory, but this is a great diplomatic triumph for Rishi Sunak. You could see in the rapport with the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, my dear Rishi, she said. Can you imagine her saying that about my dear Liz? Remember her? Or my dear Teresa?
Or my dear Boris.
Or my dear Boris.
May I just a little point of context, though? The best deal was to be in the European Union.
Move on, Kevin.
Sunak should have thought of this in 2016 when he backed Brexit without thinking of Northern Ireland.
Kevin.
He hailed Johnson's bad deal as excellent at the time. And it's only now he's waking up. And the border hasn't entirely disappeared down the Irish Sea. It hasn't, which is a DUP objection. But I think it's a clever answer.
And it was never going to be perfect, but this is... I've talked to lots of the ERG, the hardliners, the Brexit Spartans, who said we didn't think he could pull off so much, particularly getting the Northern Ireland Assembly can say for veto any EU law. Yeah. You couldn't do that if you were in Norway, which has got still a trading arrangement.
It's probably also a good idea, Kevin, to get someone like Steve Baker, who was from the ERG, so a really hardline Brexiteer, to bring him on board into the government as a Northern Ireland minister.
Yeah, I used to chair it, as did Chris Heaton-Harris, who is the Northern Ireland Secretary. He used to chair the ERG, who consider themselves Spartans. They're all a bit weird at times, but nevertheless, they are the hardline.
Weird, Kevin. They just believe in Brexit.
He's managed to split them, although Baker's gone a bit over the top now, so he doesn't have to resign, saying, look, there's a statesmanship on a par with the Good Friday Agreement by Tony Blair. No, it's not. It's not in that league at all, but I can see why he has to gush to justify himself.
And also, you might say, really clever political play by Rishi Sunak to not have your enemies on the outside throwing stones in, but to have them on the inside solving the problem.
Of course, it's probably his first success as Prime Minister. I think David Davis, former Brexit Secretary, was, this could change the fortunes of the Conservative Party. I don't think that's true, but nevertheless, You might give credit where it's due, and he's
it's
come
interesting.
up with
The headline on the Metro says, right, you can put the oven on now, referring to Boris Johnson's, you know, it's an oven-ready deal. They have rather put Boris Johnson back in the fridge, haven't they?
They have. And, of course, if the deal had... If he'd got Tory MP after Tory MP standing up saying this is appalling, it's a sellout, it's a betrayal, Boris's star rises. The only Tory I heard actually criticising it was Nadine Dorries. But I don't think she'd read the detail because they hadn't seen the detail.
As a Brit, I was embarrassed when Boris Johnson represented my country abroad. I was embarrassed when Theresa May did mercifully brief. I'm not embarrassed when Rishi Sunak does. It doesn't mean I agree with much or hardly any of what he says. I'm not embarrassed. He's a figure that you can see they will listen to. And he's shown. Now, Johnson did it with lies and bad faith. He's gone with good faith.
That's interesting you say that, because that won't come as any comfort to Keir Starmer.
No.
If you, as a dyed-in-the-wool Labour supporters,
No, I'm not dyed in the wool. I voted tactically. I didn't vote Labour at the last general election. So,
but my point is, people who support Labour, perhaps, and would have been minded to support Keir Starmer, they start seeing Rishi Sunak as somebody who they can be proud is representing their country. That isn't that's not good news for the polling, is it, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a triumph for him. And to be fair to the Labour leader, he praised him and said we'll support it. And of course he's going to dominate the headlines now for the next week, and they'll be pretty good. And the DUP will have to, in some form, come on side, in my view.
But Susanna, not being embarrassed about somebody representing you abroad as a law bar.
I wasn't
embarrassed. And I will just now mention the cost of living crisis, energy bills, strikes, taxes going up, what's happening in public services.
There's plenty of reasons to criticise. I just wonder whether Sir Keir Starmer might think he has pulled off quite the political headline.
But it does open up the question now, though. I mean, this changes things for people who export to Northern Ireland and for people in Northern Ireland. For the rest of
get your
the UK, it doesn't change too much.
Sausages.
But there's a whole series of questions now about our relationship with the European Union. Can we sort out the way in which food moves across to the continent, the science cooperation, where the young people can go and work across the European Union?
They're about to sign up to that big science deal, aren't they?
The Horizon. Yeah, because
sign up to it.
But what's going to happen now is other businesses are going to say, well, actually, in Great Britain, we quite like the Northern Ireland deal and the relationship with the European Union and going across that 310-mile land border. Why can't we have it going into France? Why can't we have it going into Germany, and Belgium, and Holland, and everywhere else, into Spain and Portugal?
I think people will think the Prime Minister's now clearly got a great relationship with the head of the European Commission. All the other EU heads have signed up to it. So I think it all goes well for the future.
Are you praising the EU and the European Commission? This could be
I think she did very well. Can you imagine that dreadful man Juncker standing up? He'd have been struggling to hold on to the lectern because he'd been having a brandy.
Just talk to us about the controversy over the King. Those photographs and the video of the King meeting Ursula von der Leyen. She's not a head of state, but obviously this is very positive imagery. It helps Rishi Sunak to sell the deal. It helps, as you say, for him to use somebody who's so important to the DUP, and he needs them to sign up.
The Windsor Agreement.
Why is and calling it the Windsor Agreement?
Smart.
Why is it giving so many people a stomachache?
Because I think they think the Queen would never have allowed herself to be drawn into something like that so soon after. I mean, literally within an hour or so of them talking side by side. This is a new king. He's made it absolutely clear, visiting politicians who come to Britain, he wants to meet them.
It's also politically contentious.
it is.
And the Queen wouldn't have got herself into something...
I suspect the King knew... The King's got his own staff, don't forget, who'd be doing their soundings. There wasn't much controversy in the Commons yesterday about this deal. Broad agreement.
Chaz is a new king, a man in a hurry, because he's so old, he's waited so long, he wants to meet everybody who comes. And just remember the late Queen, governments, all political colours, they rolled her out to host Putin. Mugabe got a knighthood.
The Romanian bloke,
come on.
Ceausescu.
I mean, this idea that the monarch never gets involved in politics or controversial decisions is nonsense.
Quite clever.
Yeah, I thought it was quite unwise.
Well, I think if it gets the DUP over the line, well done, Boris.
I think it's
well done, Rishi.
I think it's part of the ingenuity.
We talked... Oh, look, we have had plenty of rows about Brexit on this programme, and I think, you know, it was one of those issues before COVID where it actually caused massive divisions within people's families.
Yeah.
And a lot of arguments and a lot of, you know, emotional pain. What is remarkable is that Steve Baker, who we just talked about, you know, the Northern Ireland minister, told Robert Peston last night, about his mental health struggles following Brexit clashes in Parliament over the last 7 years. He said that back in November 2021, he felt he couldn't go on. Let's have a listen to what he said. This is very remarkably open.
Yeah, November 21, I just couldn't go on. In fact, I'd been at my prayer group and I just found myself in floods of tears and I found myself, you know, in a ball crying in my office.
I mean, that's extraordinary for somebody to admit such vulnerability, actually, and very brave of him to say that.
And often you don't get men talking like that in particular, so I think that is brave. And it's a level of the terrible level of abuse that went on both sides of the argument, which was unacceptable.
He was a kind of... He appeared at the time a kind of raw-ball politician, you know, just ploughing on. He could be quite acerbic and aggressive, but good for him... conceding that he had vulnerabilities because, you know, many other people do, and if you suffer in absolute silence, you think, you know, you might think you're the only one, and then it gets worse. If he talks about it publicly, you got to like him for it and admire him.
And Kevin and I
wish him
know,
the best
contrary to that public impression of being one of these dogmatic hardline brigs, he's a really nice bloke actually, and he's got a family and children.
Of course.
And he went through a tough time.
I wonder what the great Betty Boothroyd, who passed away yesterday, the first ever Speaker of the House of Commons. I wonder what she would have thought of Steve Baker emoting on the television about...
Probably that he was oversharing and pull yourself together, man, because she came from the school of hard knock. She was born in a back-to-back in Dewsbury, daughter of textile workers.
You know, she was a Tiller girl.
She was a product of her time. As hard as nails, utterly charming at the time, but if you crossed her, you had it. But at times have moved on, and I think people are more open, and I think that is better.
I used to have when she was Speaker, you'd go into Speaker's house, there was a reception, and her handbag would always be slightly open, and you'd see her packet of 20.
Yeah.
She was puffing away the whole time. Hence that wonderful gravelly voice.
Yeah.
Given the number she smoked, was it 93? I mean, she's done well.
Yeah, she really did do well. And she was very glamorous too, wasn't she? And she knew it.
Yeah.
And she could wrap men around her little finger.
Is this her last day?
This is her first day.
Oh, this is her first... I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
This is her first day.
Susanna, first woman in 700 years to be a Speaker.
Wow.
I think she was only the third Labour as well.
Do you know what? Forgive me for confusing her first day with her last day, because she did not change, did she? She looked absolutely magnificent
never
from start to
out
finish.
of place. Always that big grey bouffant.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
If you're crossed up.
And then once she was asked by an MP, what do we call you? And she said, call me Madam. It brought the house down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it brought the house down. And they did, Madam Speaker.
We are about to talk about the crisis in food, fresh food on our shelves. Of course, we've been reporting that this week. Yesterday, there was the supermarket summit. Now there are new limits on fruit and veg. Lidl now limiting customers to 3 units of tomatoes, peppers...
What does that mean, a unit?
And
does that mean
cucumbers.
a tomato, or would it be the pellet?
That's a good question, actually, because clearly what a unit of cucumber is a cucumber, yes. Yeah. But I'm not sure what a unit of tomatoes is.
They don't sell them individually, do they?
They go to a greengrocer's, they do.
That's a good point.
Bag of 6. When you were in war-torn, invaded Ukraine, did you find any salad shortages in Kyiv?
Do you know what? I didn't go grocery shopping.
Funny that.
I think there aren't any.
I think Susanna was.
I think there aren't any. I wonder what's the difference. I wonder what's happened to the UK in recent years that could have possibly...
Kevin, don't start blaming Brexit. Don't be
partly,
ridiculous,
Kevin, the war,
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
is one of the...
And
what affected ours, but not theirs.
And serious frosts in Morocco and Spain.
There was...
Hang on a sec.
Ukraine's
the Ukraine's not a member of the European Union either.
No, but they've not had their supply lines of food disrupted the way we have.
Nothing to do with Brexit, Kevin. Even Minette Batters from the NFU yesterday didn't blame Brexit.
I've been digging into this. I was quite sceptical about this Brexit stuff last week because it's clearly driven by the weather. But there is something about the way in which our supply chains are working and the costs of transport and of moving trucks around, which does seem to mean that these vegetables are finding it harder to get to the UK outside the EU compared to other European countries.
It's all to do with the frost.
No. But look,
yes, it is.
I take the view, right? Brexiteers, you see, the European Union was the cause of all the UK's problems. Everything will be solved with Brexit. Then I got a bit bored, and I was a Remainer saying everything that's wrong with the country is because we're not in the EU. But the fact is, it is the bad weather. You're quite right.
Thank you for
heating
that.
costs in the
terrible
UK.
weather.
But Brexit has disrupted supply lines too, and the amount of bureaucracy and the costs mean when there's a shortage, they go elsewhere.
Go on, Andrew. Just
Come on, get over it, you lot.
Admit it.
Let's form a new consensus.
No.
do you know what? I
us an
think it's
apology.
time to get
right,
Brexit done to one side.
Yep.
And make Brexit work.
Yes.
It has to become...
Are you Keir Starmer? That's what he's been saying.
Yeah, no one buys what
Well,
he says.
I just think, honestly,
I
as
just
you
say-
say,
I just
Kevin, you
think-
know...
Ring the palace.
Yeah.
Get the king to make a statement.
But it's a 100 billion plus hit on the economy. I mean, that's...
You make these figures up.
No.
Yes, you do.
Have you heard of the Office for Budget Responsibility?
Yes, they get everything wrong.
Oh, my
they
God.
Make their
I'm feeling all
time.
Steve Baker. I'm getting all gloomy again.
I'm going to put you both in a fridge for a moment.
He's going all DUP here.
Andrew and Kevin will have their say on that Brexit deal in more Do you need more from Andrew and Kevin on Brexit?
And again,
and the
again.
Prime Minister yesterday, of course, touting its success. But we're talking about the food crisis, and we're going to talk to George Eustace, MP. Used to have a role, of course, in government on this very issue. And so he's going to be with us next.
Former Food Secretary. We're going to speak to him in a second. Just gone 6:45. You're watching Good Morning Britain on ITV1. See you in a moment.